Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." At first glance, this idea might sound heavy and perhaps even unsettling, but it also points toward an overlooked dynamic in many families: the unspoken, unresolved conflicts that accumulate over time and echo across generations. We often assume that as families mature, everyone eventually learns to get along through sheer familiarity or routine. Yet hidden resentments, silent expectations, and deeply rooted patterns can quietly thrive beneath the surface, brewing tension that erupts in subtle or not-so-subtle ways. Could it be that our assumptions about family harmony in later years are incomplete, and that true resolution requires a different sort of wisdom, one that recognizes the power of our inner landscapes? Imagine the many years a family spends together like threads in a vast tapestry. Each thread contributes to an image that looks whole to the outside observer. But even a finely woven tapestry can hide loose ends and tangled knots on its underside. When we flip that tapestry to examine the underside, we discover how all those threads truly connect. Some knots are secured, while others are precariously tied, threatening to unravel at any moment. The family unit, like that tapestry, can appear outwardly cohesive, but the underside might reveal unresolved feelings and unspoken wounds that never found the right conditions for healing. If we are willing to examine this underside, our hidden emotional complexities, we may find that family conflicts in later life are not final tests of patience, but profound opportunities for mutual growth and a deeper bond. So, how do we bring ourselves to lift the tapestry and explore what lies beneath? What steps can we take to transform potentially painful interactions into moments of collective wisdom? These are the questions that invite us to challenge the default perception that time alone heals all family rifts. Instead, Carl Jung's perspectives encourage us to recognize that true understanding involves confronting our own shadows, questioning our own projections, and consciously stepping into our individual process of individuation. In doing so, we can learn to approach those mature family conflicts not merely as disruptions or discomforts, but as pathways leading to genuine resolution and renewed connection. Reflect on that for a moment. Might there be a more profound journey within these tensions than we typically acknowledge? Could these conflicts be doorways to a shared evolution rather than obstacles to be endured? Jung's theories illuminate that the psyche's growth is rarely smooth, but rather, it follows the natural pattern of challenge and transformation. And within the family, those challenges often come from the very people we expect to understand us best. Perhaps that is precisely why these conflicts can be transformed into powerful catalysts for wisdom, provided we are willing to undertake the inner work and face the loose ends we have ignored for too long. Modern society has presented us with a curious paradox about family life. On one hand, there is the widespread notion that adulthood, and especially midlife or older adulthood, is a time of settled calm. We assume that parents and adult children have outgrown their youthful tensions, and that grandparents and grandchildren get along smoothly. On the other hand, people often joke, and sometimes lament, about how holiday gatherings and significant life events can stir up old arguments with surprising intensity. We joke about the family drama, yet the continued repetition of these patterns signals that the roots of these disagreements run deeper than mere personality quirks. From an early age, we are shaped by our caregivers' approach to conflict. Children watch and learn whether disagreements get resolved through communication or suppressed with silence. If we grow up believing conflict is something shameful or inherently painful, we carry that view into adulthood and respond similarly when mature family disagreements arise. But what if our early understanding of conflict is incomplete? What if there is a dimension of maturity, often overlooked, that can reveal conflict as an arena for applying personal insight and, more critically, for recognizing the influence of our unconscious. Carl Jung believed the unconscious mind plays a pivotal role in directing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, even when we remain unaware of it. The collected experiences of our family upbringing store archetypal patterns and emotional imprints that shape how we interpret the world and each other. Hence, where society might say, families outgrow their conflicts, Jung's work suggests we do not outgrow anything we haven't fully processed. Indeed, the unconscious can carry old resentments and half-buried desires, surfacing when conditions trigger them, often at family gatherings or in the course of familiar, decades-old dynamics. This insight from Jung compels us to rethink one of the most common misconceptions, that conflict simply disappears with time. Time can dull the edges of hurt feelings, but unexamined wounds remain. Without conscious effort, those old hurts arise repeatedly, disguised by new circumstances. The truth is, many families find themselves cycling through the same arguments in slightly new forms, old wine in new bottles, until deeper reflection and resolution take place. Through Jung's lens, these recurring patterns aren't inconveniences but invitations to look inward, question our habitual reactions, and ask, what is my unconscious trying to teach me? That is where we bridge into the Jungian idea of individuation. While early life focuses on establishing our social persona, building careers, forming relationships, raising children, the later stages of life call us to confront deeper psychic material. The societal perspective often overlooks that we continue evolving psychologically beyond the conventional milestones of adulthood. In Jung's view, the second half of life is crucial for accessing inner wisdom, integrating our shadows, and inviting reconciliation with parts of ourselves we have previously disowned. Family conflicts can become a vital catalyst for this process. Through them, we see reflections of what we have not fully acknowledged or accepted in ourselves. In recognizing these parts, we begin dissolving the illusions that keep us disconnected from our loved ones. In practical terms, consider how you might relate to a sibling who seemed favored during childhood. If you carry hidden resentment, you may repeatedly clash with them over the smallest slight. Perhaps those repeated conflicts are your unconscious mind's way of surfacing the older grief. Society might say, let bygones be bygones. But Jung's perspective advises we pay keen attention to the pattern, explore its origins, and unravel it consciously. From this vantage, conflict is transformed from a divisive force into a teacher. This Jungian principle underlines that real resolution requires going inward, understanding the personal material that intensifies our reactions, and emerging with a more honest sense of self. When multiple family members undertake this type of introspection, the dynamics shift in a way that mere time or casual avoidance could never achieve. A helpful way to understand this transformation is by comparing our psychological life stages to the cycles of nature. Youth can be likened to spring, a time of outward growth, vibrant exploration, and establishing identity. Midlife might be akin to summer, the period of sustaining what we have built. Eventually comes autumn, often associated with harvest, reaping what we have sown, and sometimes facing the beginning of inevitable decline or reflection. Winter, in its stillness, invites a deeper internal process, where one's inner wisdom might crystallize. Families as collective systems also pass through these cycles. There are times of blossoming, times of fruitfulness, times of gathering, and times of stillness. Conflicts in mature families often surface during the autumn phase of the familial cycle, just as leaves begin to fall. Old illusions slip away, revealing the true structure of the tree. It is here that the family's capacity for renewal is tested. Jung introduced several core concepts that can guide us in understanding and resolving these familial conflicts during the later stages of life. One of the most central is the individuation process, where each person moves toward integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of themselves. In the family context, individuation doesn't mean distancing oneself from loved ones. Rather, it involves seeing them through a clearer lens, free from projection. Projections occur when we attribute our own unrecognized traits and emotions to others. For instance, if you find yourself believing your adult child is always overly sensitive, it may be a clue that your own sensitivity is being denied or minimized. Another vital Jungian concept is the shadow, the repository for all the qualities we reject in ourselves. By midlife or older adulthood, we may have a well-defined persona, our socially acceptable face, but the shadow often grows larger if left unattended. It acts like a closet where we stuff traits we dislike or fear. Eventually, these hidden traits spill out in surprising ways, and conflicts can arise when two family members' shadows clash. The path to resolution includes recognizing that each person in the family has a shadow, and acknowledging how those shadows interact becomes a necessary step for genuine harmony. Recent developments in neuroscience reinforce the importance of paying attention to these unconscious processes. Brain imaging studies suggest that emotional memories can remain dormant, yet still influence behavior and physiological responses. Even if we consciously forget an old conflict, our limbic system, often referred to as our emotional brain, can be triggered into reactivity by subtle cues. That is why seemingly trivial remarks at a family dinner can spark a disproportionately strong reaction. Neuroscientific research supports Jung's idea that knowledge alone isn't enough. Emotional integration is crucial. One study from the field of affective neuroscience shows how naming and processing emotions can reduce the intensity of amygdala activation, thus helping individuals respond more calmly to triggering situations. This finding dovetails with Jung's belief that bringing the unconscious into consciousness lessens its power to sabotage us. To see these dynamics in real life, consider the example of an older father and his adult daughter who find themselves bickering over daily trivialities. She might feel that he constantly criticizes her life choices, while he insists she's overly defensive. Beneath the surface, however, may lie the father's regret over missed opportunities in his own life, which morphs into excessive advice-giving. The daughter, carrying the memory of not feeling fully supported during her teenage years, perceives his input as condemnation rather than care. This is the conflict's underside, the messy knots in the family tapestry. Through conscious dialogue, therapy, or personal reflection, they could uncover these deeper layers. The father might realize he's projecting his dissatisfaction onto his daughter, while she might recognize her old wounds and find new ways to express her feelings. This shared acknowledgement transforms conflict into a mirror for their inner journeys, and as a result, paves the way for real healing. Similarly, modern psychology research, such as studies examining attachment styles in adulthood, underscores that our early interactions with caregivers shape how we handle conflict later in life. People with more anxious attachments might become highly reactive, interpreting normal disagreements as threats to the relationship, while those with avoidant attachments might withdraw at the first sign of tension. Jung's work does not dispute these attachment-based findings, but rather enriches them by emphasizing the role of the unconscious and archetypal patterns in sustaining these behaviors. Understanding your attachment style can inform how you approach the individuation process, helping you see how your family conflicts might be the stage on which your unresolved attachment traumas play out. The journey of transforming mature family conflicts is also a journey of integrating these diverse psychological components. Over time, we move from merely blaming others or feeling victimized to a more reflective stance. We start asking, Why am I so triggered by this issue? What does my reaction reveal about my inner world? It is through this questioning that we engage in the real psychological transitions Jung spoke of, transitions that bring us closer to authenticity. As we shed old defense mechanisms, we begin stepping into a freer, more integrated identity. And from that place, our approach to family conflict changes from combative to collaborative, from defensive to curious, and from rigid to flexible. That said, letting go of long-held grievances can be challenging. We may fear losing a familiar identity or worry that if we relinquish our grievances, we'll also lose our sense of self-protection. Yet Jung's theory reassures us that individuating and integrating the shadow is not a process of weakening. It is one of strengthening. When we hold on to old pains, we allow the unconscious to control us from behind the curtain. But when we face these pains consciously, we reclaim our personal power. In family settings, this might manifest as no longer being compelled to win every argument or to remain silent out of guilt. Instead, we find a middle path anchored in honest self-awareness. This middle path also requires acknowledging the role of the persona, that outward mask we present to the world. In many families, people adopt predictable roles: the caretaker, the black sheep, the peacemaker, or the overachiever. These roles are part of the persona, and they can become so entrenched that we mistake them for genuine identity. Conflict arises when the real, evolving self tries to break free from these roles. For instance, the peacemaker might finally express frustration after years of keeping the peace, shocking everyone else and causing tension. From a Jungian standpoint, this conflict marks a powerful opportunity for growth. The family can finally see the authentic person behind the role, and the individual can integrate that authenticity into their daily life. It is a moment pregnant with the possibility of greater understanding, but it requires stepping beyond the persona and meeting each other from a place of deeper truth. Our unconscious elements, both individual and collective, shape the contours of each family conflict. As Jung recognized, we share a collective unconscious filled with archetypal energies such as the wise elder, the hero, or the rebel. These archetypes can unconsciously fuel intergenerational tensions. A grandparent might unthinkingly assume the role of the wise elder, dismissing the concerns of younger family members. Or an adult child might cling to the rebel archetype, resisting any advice from parents. Bringing these patterns into awareness diminishes their grip, allowing more flexible, open communication. This integrative process requires patience and sometimes guidance from mental health professionals. Contemporary psychologists like Dr. Murray Bowen developed family systems theory, which resonates with Jung's emphasis on interconnected psychological influences. Bowen observed how anxiety and unresolved trauma can spread across generations, leading to entrenched family roles. From a Jungian perspective, addressing these dynamics means shining a light on both the personal shadow and the collective patterns that shape family behaviors. Similarly, Dr. Sue Johnson's work on emotional-focused therapy has shown that when family members learn to communicate underlying emotions rather than attacking each other's perceived flaws, they experience dramatic improvement in their relationships. Scientific studies corroborate the transformational power of conscious conflict resolution. Longitudinal research from institutions like the Harvard Study of Adult Development has found that the quality of our close relationships, especially in later years, profoundly impacts overall well-being and even physical health. When mature family members resolve conflicts, they not only restore harmony within the unit, but also promote better mental and emotional health for themselves. This echoes Jung's assertion that self-knowledge and integration lead to not just psychological balance, but to a holistic sense of well-being. Neuroscientist Dr. Daniel Siegel emphasizes the importance of mindsight, the capacity to perceive one's own mind as well as the minds of others. Mindsight practices encourage awareness of how our brains and nervous systems respond to emotional triggers, improving our ability to pause before reacting. This aligns with Jung's call to bring unconscious material into consciousness, reducing the chance of letting old patterns dominate our interactions. Mindfulness and other contemplative techniques have found their way into mainstream psychology for precisely this reason. They facilitate the self-reflection essential for resolving deep-seated conflicts. As we weave these findings back into the family tapestry metaphor, a clearer picture emerges. The threads of personal history, emotional memory, unconscious influences, and archetypal roles all intertwine. Lifting the tapestry means daring to look at our own loose ends and tangled knots, rather than dismissing them as unsightly flaws. Engaging in genuine resolution is akin to carefully untangling those knots, so that the tapestry remains strong and, in fact, becomes more resilient as it is conscientiously repaired. At times, this might entail reweaving certain sections, finding new, more harmonious patterns where conflict once ruled. The result isn't a perfect tapestry, perfection is an illusion, but a richer, more authentic one, with restored integrity and renewed design. It is important to acknowledge the shadow aspects that arise during this work. Envy, pride, regret, fear, and other emotions we wish would remain hidden. Yet our willingness to face and integrate these emotions is what empowers us to transform conflict into understanding. By owning our shadow, we dissolve the projections that might demonize our siblings, parents, or children. This does not mean ignoring harmful behaviors or perpetuating abuse. On the contrary, Jung's work underscores the need for boundaries and discernment. It means recognizing that blaming or shaming others without examining our own unconscious wounds merely perpetuates the cycle. Real resolution emerges from a courageous stance that looks both inward and outward with honesty and empathy. Consider how different it feels to approach a difficult conversation from a place of unacknowledged tension versus a place of awareness. In the first scenario, we are reactive, easily triggered and rigid. In the second, we can remain centered, curious, and flexible. Jung's approach helps us develop the second stance. This is the psychological depth that truly resonates, honoring the persona we built over decades while acknowledging the shadow that lurks behind it, and continually striving to bring more and more of our unconscious material into the light. Expert voices in psychology emphasize the healing potential of such introspective work. Dr. Gabor Mate, for instance, speaks extensively about how family dynamics and trauma shape our lifelong relational patterns. He reminds us that understanding our own pain is a prerequisite for empathizing with others, especially close family members. The shift from harboring anger or guilt to understanding and compassion is not a passive acceptance of harmful behavior, but a clarifying recognition that everyone operates from their own labyrinth of experiences and wounds. When multiple family members adopt this perspective, conflicts can evolve from battlegrounds to opportunities for collective insight. Though many families find themselves stuck, the willingness of even one person to explore these depths can initiate change. Researchers have shown that changing one element in a system can ripple out and influence the entire group dynamic over time. In a mature family, where patterns may be decades old, this can feel daunting. However, the process becomes a genuine rite of passage for each family member who engages, opening a path to deeper bonds and renewed respect. This underscores the modern application of Jung's timeless insights. While we cannot control others' behavior, we can transform how we engage with them by transforming ourselves. As you take stock of your own family situation, remember that these conflicts need not signal a breakdown. Instead, they can serve as a wake-up call to embrace a deeper stage of growth. If a family gathering triggers old resentments, it might be pointing you toward an inner reservoir of unacknowledged feelings, a part of yourself that needs your compassionate attention. If a loved one confronts you about a behavior you have long denied, perhaps it is an invitation to peer into that shadow closet. The challenging part is that we often resist these wake-up calls precisely because they are uncomfortable. Yet in facing our discomfort lies the doorway to transformation. Returning to the perspective we began with, that time alone should resolve all conflicts, Jung's philosophy shows us a more nuanced truth. Time can only erode the surface tension. Genuine resolution requires a deliberate, introspective process that goes well beyond the passage of years. It calls for the courageous integration of shadow, the unveiling of persona, and the willingness to engage in honest dialogue. In this sense, mature family conflicts become a crucible for wisdom, forging deeper connections and inviting each participant to discover the powerful intersection of self-awareness and empathetic understanding. So, how might we leave behind our earlier assumption that family conflict in later life is merely a source of stress or disappointment? The tapestry metaphor encourages us to see such conflicts as threads that need careful sorting and occasionally reweaving. Initially, it may feel like our neat design is being undone, but in reality, we are cleansing the threads of old grime and knots. As we weave them back into place with clearer intention, the tapestry becomes a truer reflection of who we have become. It is no longer merely a family pattern handed down through generations. It is a living design shaped by conscious, evolving individuals. In the end, we circle back to that haunting statement from Jung: the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. If we do not examine our own wounds, regrets, and hidden desires, we unconsciously pass them on to the next generation in the form of unspoken expectations or criticisms. By contrast, if we do the inner work of individuation and shadow integration, we lift that burden. We free both ourselves and our loved ones from perpetuating unhealed patterns. This is how mature family conflicts become stepping stones toward a legacy of greater psychological freedom and emotional intimacy for everyone involved. Thus, we return to the initial questions. Could these conflicts be doorways to a shared evolution rather than obstacles to be avoided? Could they guide us toward deeper understanding and unity? In the light of Jung's insights, the answer is yes, provided we are willing to follow the threads into our own unconscious, confront our projections, and treat conflict as a vital ingredient of growth rather than a sign of failure. By doing so, we give ourselves and our families the gift of true resolution, one that arises not from mere endurance, but from a conscious transformation that enriches our collective tapestry.